It was a Tuesday, just a regular, forgettable Tuesday. I was on my porch, letting the day's heat bleed out of the concrete into the cool night air. The moon was out, as it always was, on a clear night. A perfect pearly circle hanging in the dark. It was a comforting sight, a silent old friend that watched over the sleeping world. I never paid it much mind. Not really. It was just there, like the streetlights humming at the end of the block or the distant bark of a neighbour's dog. The kind of constant you build your life around without ever noticing. It was beautiful, I guess, in a quiet, unassuming way. A silver coin tossed into a well of stars, familiar and forever unchanging. But tonight, something felt different. I couldn't put my finger on it. The air was still. The usual city hum seemed muffled, as if the world was holding its breath. I looked up at the moon again, trying to shake the feeling. It seemed brighter than usual, its light casting sharp, unnerving shadows that danced in ways they shouldn't. The glow wasn't the soft, gentle light I knew. It was sharper, more intense. It felt less like reflected sunlight and more like a light from within. A cold, sterile radiance that made the hairs on my arms stand up. It was the kind of light you'd see in a hospital hallway late at night, clean and unsettling. I squinted, thinking my eyes were playing tricks on me. Maybe it was the wine I had with dinner, but the feeling wouldn't go away. The moon's surface, a familiar map of craters and seas, looked wrong. The patterns seemed to shift just for a second, like a trick of the light. I shook my head, laughing quietly at my own imagination. The moon doesn't change. It's a rock, a dead, silent rock that has been there for billions of years. But the longer I stared, the more I felt a creeping sense of unease. It was a primal fear, the kind that whispers from the forgotten corners of your mind, telling you that something ancient and fundamental is breaking. I pulled out my phone, thinking I'd distract myself. I scrolled through social media, but my feed was already buzzing. "Is the moon weird tonight?" one post asked. "Anyone else seeing this?" said another, with a blurry photo attached. It wasn't just me. Across the city, across the world, people were walking out of their homes, tilting their heads to the sky. They were all seeing the same thing. The familiar was becoming strange. The constant was becoming a variable. Our silent, dependable nightlight was doing something new, and none of us knew what it meant. The quiet comfort of the night was gone, replaced by a shared, unspoken question mark hanging over all of us. The glow intensified. It pulsed softly at first, then with a steady, rhythmic beat. It was like a giant cosmic heartbeat in the sky. The soft white light turned a sickly pale silver, bathing everything in an alien hue. Then we saw the line. A dark, thin fissure appeared across the center of the moon. It was a perfect horizontal line, impossibly straight. It wasn't a shadow or a cloud, it was a crack. It was as if the moon itself was being sliced in half by an invisible blade. People gasped. I heard my neighbor next door let out a small choked cry. The world fell silent, save for the frantic chirping of phones and the distant wail of sirens starting up. The crack widened. Slowly, agonizingly, it spread. It grew from a hairline fracture into a dark, gaping chasm. It was like watching an eggshell break in slow motion. But this was no egg. This was the moon, the anchor of our nights, the puller of our tides. It was breaking apart right before our eyes. The edges of the fissure glowed with a faint purple light, a color I had never seen in nature. It was a beautiful and terrifying sight. A part of me was in awe of the sheer spectacle, the impossible cosmic event unfolding above us. But the larger part of me was screaming. This was wrong. This was a violation of the natural order. This was the end of something. From within that growing darkness, something began to emerge. It wasn't an explosion or a burst of light. It was a slow, deliberate unveiling. The two halves of the moon didn't drift apart. They pulled back like eyelids, heavy, ancient, celestial eyelids. The dark chasm was not an empty void. It was an eye, a colossal eye staring down at the earth. The seas and craters of the moon's surface were not rock and dust anymore. They were the skin, the texture of some gargantuan, unknowable creature that had been sleeping in our sky for all of human history. The moon was not a rock, it was a face, and it was waking up. The collective mind of humanity shattered in that moment. Panic erupted. People were screaming in the streets, running without direction. Car alarms blared. The fabric of our reality, the one where the moon was a predictable, inanimate object, was torn to shreds. I stood frozen on my porch, my phone forgotten in my hand. My mind couldn't process it. It was too big, too impossible. The moon was alive. The moon was an eye. And that eye, which filled a third of the night sky, was slowly, deliberately focusing. It was focusing on the little blue marble teeming with panicked, insignificant creatures. It was focusing on us. The eye did not blink. It just stared. The surface of the moon, which was its skin, rippled sometimes, a slow, subtle twitch, like the flank of a giant beast. The pupil was a void of absolute blackness, an abyss that seemed to swallow the starlight around it. The iris was a swirling nebula of dark greys and deep purples, a storm of cosmic dust that moved with terrifying purpose. We were ants under a magnifying glass. That's what it felt like. All our history, all our wars, our art, our love, our ambition, it all amounted to nothing under that immense, indifferent gaze. We were a curiosity, a speck of dust on the lens of something that thought on a scale of eons. News channels were a chaotic mess of screaming anchors and shaky, useless footage. Scientists were brought on screen, their faces pale with a mixture of terror and awe. They had no answers. Their models, their physics, their entire understanding of the universe had become obsolete in a single night. What do you say when the moon opens its eye? What theory explains that? Religions fractured. Some proclaimed it was God, others the devil. New cults were probably being born in basements and online forums, trying to find meaning in the horrifying spectacle. But there was no meaning to be found. There was only the eye. Watching, waiting. The world ground to a halt. The economy, politics, social media drama, it all evaporated. What did any of it matter now? Humanity was united for the first time, not by hope, but by a shared, paralyzing fear. We were all children huddled in the dark, staring at the monster in the closet. But the closet was our sky. The monster was the size of a celestial body. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Every corner of the planet that faced the night was bathed in its gaze. The other side of the world, still in daylight, could only wait in dread for the sun to set. They knew what was waiting for them when darkness fell. I felt a strange calm settle over me amidst the chaos. It was the calm of pure, unadulterated insignificance. My mortgage didn't matter, my job didn't matter, my anxieties were laughable. All the tiny things that occupied my mind an hour ago were meaningless. My entire existence, my entire species was a footnote in the story of this thing. This creature had been here all along, sleeping right above us, a silent god masquerading as a lump of rock. We had written poems about it, landed on it, and never once did we suspect the truth. We were never alone. We were just living in the shadow of something that hadn't woken up yet. As the hours passed, the initial panic subsided into a tense global vigil. We were watching it, and it was watching us. The eye began to slowly, deliberately scan the surface of our planet. You could feel its gaze moving, a cold pressure sweeping across continents. It wasn't looking for anything in particular, it seemed. It was simply observing, taking it all in, the way a person might idly watch a bug crawling across their hand before deciding what to do with it. The sheer intelligence in that gaze was the most terrifying part. It was not a mindless force of nature, it was aware, it was conscious, and it was ancient beyond our comprehension. I stayed on my porch, wrapped in a blanket, unable to look away. I thought about everything, my childhood, my family, the dreams I had. It all felt like a distant memory from someone else's life. The only reality was the now. The only truth was the eye in the sky. It was a truth so massive and so horrifying that it eclipsed everything else. We had spent our entire existence looking out at the stars, wondering if we were alone. We had been looking in the wrong direction. The greatest mystery, the greatest terror wasn't in the distant galaxies. It had been our closest neighbor all along, patiently waiting. What did it want? The question hung in the air, unspoken by billions. Was it hostile? Was it curious? Was it hungry? We had no way of knowing. We were completely at its mercy. Our weapons, our technology, our collective knowledge, all of it was like a child's toy against a god. If it wanted to wipe us out, it could. If it wanted to ignore us, it could. We were no longer the masters of our own destiny. That illusion had been shattered forever. We were now characters in a story being written by something else, and we couldn't even begin to guess the plot. The powerlessness was absolute. The first rays of dawn began to creep over the horizon, painting the eastern sky in shades of orange and pink. The eye remained. It did not fade with the coming light. It just watched, its cosmic gaze now competing with the rising sun. A new day was beginning, but it was not a day of hope. It was the first day of a new era, an era of fear, an era of uncertainty. I stared back at the eye, my fear mixing with a strange sense of finality. It knew I was there. It saw me. And as the sun rose higher, I knew with a chilling certainty that settled deep in my bones that it was not going to close, not ever again.